The movie starts with a view of an apartment building zooming out to be found in New York suburbs. Inside view of apartment is all messed up with blood stains on the floor. We suddenly cut to our protagonist Emily, who visits a prison facility to meet her husband Martin. They both are looking happy and excited as Martin tells her that social workers are working on his reintegration. Scene changes and Emily and Martin's mother comes to the prison's gate to receive Martin as he is released. Martin is wearing his white wedding suit, hinting to the time when he got arrested. Right next scene shows that Martin is back home and getting intimate with Emily, but she wasn't much excited doing the intimate act with Martin after all the years they spent apart. Following the act, Martin was discussing his future planning to make everything right like how it was. He mentioned a person named Marshall Hellman that he met in prison. He told Emily about Hellman's money and connections in Dubai. Later, Emily was walking down the parking lot and she looked quite disturbed and clumsy as she dropped her bag and a car cleaner helped her. She sat in the car with teary eyes, buckled up her seatbelt and accelerated without any second thought. She crashed her car in the concrete wall of parking lot. Scene changed and here we have Dr. Jonathan Banks, a psychiatrist, assisting police in interrogation of a French guy. After interrogation, he goes to meet Emily, telling the nurse on his way that he is working double shifts today. Upon investigation, Emily told Dr. Banks that she just can't stay hospitalized any longer, while she assured him that she will meet him in his clinic afterwards, because her husband just came back from prison after 4 years. Now Emily is sitting at her workplace mindlessly looking at her boss, who is chattering on the phone. She suddenly grabs her antidepressant pills and runs towards restroom, where she throws up. Her boss follows her and told her that she also used to take those pills and it made her sick also. In the next scene, Emily is sitting at Dr. Banks' clinic telling him about how she met Martin 5 years ago when she used to work in a bar, and Martin asked her out, proposed, and they got married. She also mentioned that she used to see Dr. Victoria Sabert in Greenwich, Connecticut when she felt depressed before. Dr. Banks met Dr. Sabert to discuss the case. Victoria mentioned that she saw Emily 4 years ago and now she is happy that a male doctor is taking care of her because she lacks a male figure in her life. She also mentioned some medications that she used on Emily. Dr. Sabert suggested a new medicine, Ablixia. She also mentioned Emily's miscarriage. Emily and Martin were getting ready for a party when Martin asked her not to mention about Hellman to his partner Carl and his wife Kayla, as he suspected that Carl is the one who went to FEDs against him. He told Emily that she may not accompany him to the party if she isn't feeling comfortable in meeting them, but she insisted to come along. Emily had another major depression episode at the party in front of Kayla, making that it is noticed by people around. Now Emily is standing at a subway station where she came dangerously closer to the tracks when a train is approaching, only to be pulled back by the guard. She was aware of her suicide attempt again, that's why she went to meet Dr. Banks. When he was at an office with his wife, dared her where she was going in for a job interview. Emily told him about recent episode at Subway. Dr. Banks realized the severity and went with her for a discussion. Emily told Dr. Banks that Martin is going to start business with Hellman. He is trying to make things work and she is trying to spice up their intimate life as she showed a bag of lingerie to Doctor. She also mentioned that she is suffering from sleeplessness and no drive because of medicines. Next scene shows Emily buying Ablixia and learning about its side effects from a pharmacist. Scene changes and Dr. Banks is sitting with his fellow doctors for a lunch, where a lady offered him a research trial of a new anti-anxiety drug, for which she needs some doctors to consult, and this research is going to last for a year. Dr. Banks accepted that offer and he was excitedly telling his wife that they will pay him $50,000. But he has to recruit some patients to track data and go for a few meetings, so he'll be even busier. Banks starts to unbutton her shirt when Banks' stepson Ezra enters and tells he had a bad dream. Banks goes with Ezra while comforting him to put him back to sleep. Scene changes with Emily and Martin passionately humping, looking like new medication is now working with his drive. Later, Martin's sleep is disturbed with loud music and Emily is setting dining table for 3 only to find out that she is sleepwalking. Emily and Martin went to see Dr. Banks together. Martin wanted him to change the medications, but Emily was feeling relaxed with the medicine's sleep and pleasure drive that she didn't want Dr. Banks to change it. Finally, she convinces on adding medicines to neutralize the side effects on top of the relaxation she is having. Martin tells her that he is going to meet Hellman and they both want to set up a shop in Houston. Emily was uncomfortable about moving to Houston as she mentioned that she thought they were going to live in Greenwich where she used to love before marrying Martin. Scene changed and Dr. Banks was recruiting a patient for his research, telling her that her medications would be free if she signs up for it. Emily was sitting in a subway and when she got off, it was evening. She told her boss that she forgot to get off the subway and she is disturbed because Martin wants them to move to Houston. Dr. Banks reached his home, where his wife was upset that she didn't got the job. On the other hand, Emily was chopping veggies when Martin entered home after his meeting with Hellman. He was excited to tell her about meeting, but Emily wasn't responding. That's when he realized that she is sleepwalking again. He went in the kitchen, shook her shoulder. She turned around and started stabbing him continuously and watching him fall and pass out without showing any expressions. Police was called by Emily herself and she tells them that she doesn't remember anything because she was sleeping. When woke up, she found her husband dead. Dr. Banks informs Dr. Victoria about the incident as he approaches police station to be a part of investigation and tells police officers that she doesn't remember anything because she usually sleepwalks. and it's a side effect of the new medicine, on which Doctor informs Dr. Banks that if she is a murderer she will get punished, but if she is a victim of medical treatment then Banks has to face the music. A lawyer hired by Martin's mother meets Dr. Banks and tells the severity of this case and its effects on Banks' career. After Martin's funeral, his mother goes to meet Emily where they both cried, and his mother asks Emily to explain what happened actually, because in commercials of medicines they don't show anything like these side effects. Emily replies that she wants to make a statement on television so that people would know what could happen with the usage of medicine. Martin's mother goes to TV show to read that letter of Emily blaming doctors and apoplexia. When Dr. Banks goes outside his home with his family, journalists outside bombarded him with cameras and questions. Banks immediately asks his wife to take Ezra out of the crowd. Officer investigates Banks and cross-questions him about his school at UK and practice in state. Officer also mentioned his double-shift workloads, to which he answered him satisfactorily. Darder is concerned about all journalists following and police investigating. Banks satisfies her by saying that he is only assisting police to get a better insight of patient and he is not the one who is blamed at all. Scene changed and there is the car cleaning guy at court's hearing, telling Emily's apparent state of mind when she crashed her car. Jonathan Banks explained the relation of consciousness and intent, that if someone is conscious of something then he can intend on that thing. Court orders Emily to be institutionalized until she gets better. Emily was devastated about going to special facility in Ward's Island, but Banks convinced her, telling that she is not guilty of murder. So if other doctors also testifies her mental state then they can apply for her release. Dr. Banks is sitting with the fellow doctors, who are also blaming Banks for whatever happened to Martin. Clearly they don't want to support Banks because they think he is finished, and they will be finished too if they stand with him. Man suggested Banks to get a cheaper living space because he is not going to be able to pay for it. He also mentioned that he received an anonymous letter. Banks is telling his wife about Allison Finn, former Banks patient who committed suicide and wrote a suicide note naming Banks. Apparently his wife also received a letter regarding Allison and Banks, which mentioned that they also had an inappropriate relationship. Banks was researching about apoplexia and found an article about it by Dr. Victoria Sabert. He goes to meet Dr. Sabert. When he asked her why she did not tell him about sleepwalking side effects, Victoria told him that how it was Banks' fault and how Emily told him about sleepwalking and he didn't discontinue the medicine, and she is updated on everything through news. It was time that Jonathan Banks personally starts studying the case and meet car cleaner to know exactly what happened. He comes to know that Emily was wearing seatbelt even after being upset with suicidal thoughts. When Banks met Emily's boss, she told him that she can understand Emily's condition because she went through same type of depression, and she quoted same sentence from a book that Emily used to quote. Climbing down the office stairs, Banks noticed a TV commercial in lobby's TV about the safety measures of the car, which was playing on repeat. He asked about a girl, Julia, that Emily referred to, and to his surprise there was no Julia that worked there. Banks realized that Emily is making up a story, even the suicide attempt was faked. Banks went to meet Emily. She was looking better than before. She told him that she is exercising and preparing to get out of the facility. When Banks referred to the depression quote, she said she don't feel like that anymore and she don't remember from where she read or heard that quote. Banks was removed from the research trial because of his reputation. He was also told because of Martin's case. Apoplexia shares went down the drain and competitors are high on the hog. Now Banks is connecting the dots and realized Dr. Sabert is behind all of this. She is the one who suggested it. Banks had a heated argument with his wife because everything was at stake, and Banks was obsessed with the case because he didn't want another Allison kind of controversy. Banks went to meet Emily and to conduct a test, in which he wanted to inject sodium amyl to know the true state of mind. He cross-questioned Emily and she shared the same facts which she already did. But she was faking it because he didn't actually give her a drug. He only injected saline water. No one believed Dr. Banks. He was asked to resign from Emily's case, but he wanted to prove himself right. He went to see Emily and found Dr. Victoria's name in visitor's log. Upon inquiring, Victoria also blamed him for the inhuman act of testing and torturing Emily and told him that Emily called for Victoria herself. Dr. Sabert made an envelope of Emily's half-naked pictures and of the time when Emily showed Banks the lingerie. She got to spice it up for Martin. She got it delivered to Dater Banks. When Banks reaches home, he found Dater agitated as she thought Banks cheated on her. She left with her son. There was a voicemail for Banks from Victoria where she suggested a different treatment for Emily, and the latest note sent by her. She was referring to the pictures. Banks meet Victoria where she started to blackmail him to back off, but he shot arrow in the dark saying that Emily told him everything and whoever paid you is going to take his money back. Victoria fell for it and got mad. On the other hand, Banks tells Emily that Victoria is double-crossing by suggesting shock treatment for her. He has also restricted Emily's phone calls and visitors. Finally, Emily agreed to take some pills to tell the truth. She tells Banks that she was lonely when Martin got arrested. That's how she met Victoria. Victoria herself was cheated upon by her husband and was lonely, and she always liked girls. That's when they came closer. And Victoria taught her about depression medications and their side effects. And Emily taught her about derivatives and deals. She faked her love for Martin whenever she pays him a visit. Upon question about Martin's murder, Emily told him that she had thought about it a lot and all her problems were because of him. So she decided to eliminate him. Banks shoots another arrow in the dark, telling her that Victoria knows Emily will turn against her one day as she did with Mark. Banks made a deal with Emily to testify her well-being in turn of a favor. Emily went to meet Victoria right after her release. Victoria told her about their bank accounts in which Emily's share is kept, and they kept discussing their secrets while coming closer until Victoria finds a mic in Emily's dress. Police arrests Victoria, and Banks sends Emily back to be hospitalized as schizophrenic patient in the end.